here at the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, your host. And every week we talk to professionals just like you all around the world because we want to find out what they do to create a profitable business, the kind of business where people really want to work. Hello, happy healthy day, everyone. Today we're talking to Tim Procter, and Tim is the founder at HR Six Sigma. He's a senior professional in human resources with almost 20 years experience in developing HR programs. Most of that experience is for small and medium-sized companies who are faced with massive growth and were fiercely trying to maintain their culture and values. He's an aspiring student of Six Sigma, Lean, and Agile methodologies with a deep appreciation for Scrum and how those can be integrated in HR. He has an MBA focused on management and strategy from Western Governors University, as well as a bachelor's in business administration focused on the management of information systems, which he chose specifically to identify how HR can utilize technology to solve their operational problems. Alrighty, Tim. First, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm excited about our conversation because it's about something that I love and utilize in my business model. I'm especially excited to speak to a fellow non-traditional Agile business because recently I got into a Twitter conversation with the co-founder of XP and one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto, where he was disagreeing with me that Scrum can be used in a non-traditional setting rather than with software development. At the least, he was saying that the manifesto didn't really apply to that, and he wouldn't know what an increment would be if it was outside of software. So today, Tim and I are going to disrupt that thought process and chat about why you can literally Scrum anything and anyone in business can have an Agile mindset. So Tim, let's rat you back in here. First, talk to us a little bit about why Agile is important to you.
Agile, and how I understand and view it, is really just a management methodology, right? It's a how that people do things, right? And yeah, it was designed for software development and super applicable to the development of anything that has a lot of variation. Variation, I mean like changes and abnormalities or is in flux. And that could be anything that a customer or a product owner isn't 100% sure on how they want to fulfill what they're trying to do, right? It's an intuitive and principles-based rather than a contract and tactical-based approach like you have in traditional waterfall. And, it's not civil engineering like you have to build a dam a certain way every time, right? This is designed for software and services where the end product is somewhat undefined and the pattern you can use has a lot of flexibility and variation within how you can do it. And so Agile with any professional service becomes an immensely valuable management operational methodology. It gives the practitioners the flexibility as well as the structure they need to actually have real results. And that's been demonstrated time and time again through numerous case studies and educational studies.
Yes, absolutely. So it's interesting to me that people can get very narrow-minded in things, right? And that's how we're not being agile or having continuous improvement. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what the principles of Agile are.
Yeah, so the principles of Agile are based off something that's called the Agile Manifesto. It literally is the manifesto for Agile software development. So, Ron Jeffries is right that it is designed specifically for software development. Software engineers
Correct.
Created it. However, it's applicable to everything else out there. I'm just going to read the manifesto. It basically says we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over process and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is why there is value in the items on the right. We value the items on the left more. And so that's the end of the manifesto, right? And so the four pillars of Agile, right, are individuals and interactions, working software or working product, you can change it, customer collaboration, and then responding to change.
Right.
that really is the essence of Agile.
That is true. And actually, the technical, like you said, Ron Jeffries said, is true because it has software written all in it.
So he's talking to you about Scrum, which is actually a
Right.
discipline of Agile. And their theory and their principle doesn't have anything to do with that, because theirs is about transparency, inspection, and adaptation. It was originally developed in software and technological development. The Scrum is really pretty clear in their Scrum guide that it's applicable to any type of product or service that has large amounts of variation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it does say right here in the guide, Scrum proved officially effective in iterative and incremental knowledge transfer. Scrum is now widely used for products, services, and the management of parent organizations, which is true. He was speaking directly about Scrum, but he was also using that under the umbrella of Agile.
Right.
Yeah.
So technically, you're both right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and we weren't really disagreeing with each other. It was more that we were having a conversation about what other things could be. And his stance was that, you know, if you're really looking at the manifesto correctly, this is the way it was written. I do not disagree with him, but I'd love for him to think that, you know what I mean, and have a conversation a little bit more openly about what other amazing things that we could scrum, the possibility of scrumming. Yeah, I love the idea of scrumming everything.
I agree. And your listeners can go to scrumguides.org, right? And the 2017 version of the Scrum Guide has been up there with, you know, the two founders signed on there. And, you know, it talks about the uses of Scrum on like page 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. And it talks about using it in marketing and managing operations for organizations and almost everything in daily lives and individuals and societies. It's not just a business management plan. People use it for families. They use it for community organizations and all sorts of crazy stuff, which is really cool. And it just shows the, I want to say, the applicability of how Scrum can be used. And, you know, Agile is a greater method to actually organize people in society.
Mm-hmm. It is true. Now, I was introduced to all of this really first through Lean. And there will be links to all these different types of methodologies in the show notes. But I was introduced through Lean first with the New United Motors in California. And I read it in a book. And I was dating somebody who worked there during the time when Toyota was beginning to run that Lean program. So I related with it. Fast forward, my husband is actually in software development. And when I'm building my own business in marketing, I use whiteboards a lot. And he was like, man, you're like, this is your jam, right? Like you do this already just naturally. And so you should probably look at these types of methodologies in your business, right? And I started using a really simple Kanban board that he showed me and built websites and built all kinds of things. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting because I am literally using it in a non-traditional, software. I'm building my website, but not the back end of it, right? So it was fun for me to think about how this could apply into other businesses. And then I got the broader sense of things, right? And then I was introduced to Six Sigma, and then it was Agile as the whole. So there's a lot of different types of methodologies within this Agile world. And you're Six Sigma. So what I want you to talk to us about, or what I'm really curious to hear about right now, is a little bit about Six Sigma, because I'm only slightly familiar with that. My husband uses words like future, forward, past, something like that. And I want to know how you apply that in HR. And what was your brilliant idea where you're like, dang, I could really use this in HR?
So yeah, I got introduced to, I want to say, these management operation styles, right? Because that's really what they are. Back with the GE Way Field Book, which is not the easiest read out there, but basically it is about how GE operates. And back in the 90s, they were probably the biggest company to incorporate Six Sigma widespread. And, you know, and when I say they, I mean old CEO of Six Sigma, Jack Welch. He's a huge proponent of Six Sigma, and he's actually quoted saying Six Sigma is a quality program that, when all is said and done, improves your customer's experience, lowers your cost, and builds better leaders. And the Field Book is an example of how they do everything pretty much at GE. And HR was just starting to come out of, I want to say, historical closet when I started becoming a practitioner early 2000s, where we ended up transitioning from this personnel administrative tactile role that we've been doing forever, where everything was pen, paper. Now we were looking at smarter, faster ways to utilize technology and databases and applicant tracking softwares and, all of this, and reading better ways to implement and deal with human resources and operate and manage human resources better was really what attracted me at Six Sigma. And I was working at a timeshare travel technology company called Holiday Systems International out of Las Vegas, which does basically boutique services for timeshare owners where they can exchange timeshares for cruises and things of that nature. In the mid-2000s, it was pretty inventive. Now, most of the big boys like Marriott have seemed to caught on, but HSI, or Holiday Systems International, seems to be catching on. But when I started, they were 35 employees. When I left, they were 250. And during that time, we started implementing a lot of Six Sigma practices to have those scalable and sustainable results with, standard operations. And Six Sigma is really focused, in my opinion, and this differs from the official version created by Motorola back in the 80s, but, there's 6 core aspects to it. And focus on the end user or the customer is number 1. Continuous improvement or Kaizen is number 2. Measurement and analysis, it's considered variation. Having data is the third one. Removing waste or lean management would be the 4th. Developing people would be the 5th. And then controlling the process is the 6th. And those 6 core aspects you can use and apply to anything, right? Mm-hmm. Applying them to HR helps a lot because HR, for one reason or another, never got the focus that finance or operations or marketing did, probably because there's no money really involved or, revenue involved in the HR function, right? People look at it as a cost function. And that's why you hear a lot of HR professionals talk about money saved rather than value added or revenue increased due to talent acquisition, training, development, relations, retention, succession planning, all of that. And so really what I've found is that adding the structure to HR departments, especially with small and medium-sized businesses that don't have that structure, allows them to increase their operational effectiveness so much that they're able to go from a 50-person company to a 1,000-person company really easy and maintain that culture that the founders and the owners of the company really wanted to, because it's their baby, it's their entrepreneurial vision, and holding on to that and being true to who they are as a entrepreneur and as the CEO and president and founder is super important to most founders, I found.
Yeah, scalability is frightening, especially if you don't have something, like you said, that you can continually improve or to review and to get. Even if you're at a point where it's good, like you said, you're a small business now, okay, this makes sense. Then when you move into the next level, how do you respond to that? So I like the way that you put that.
It's a big challenge for every growing company. If you look at, the 4 types of wisdom, they say you have known knowns, right? You know what you know. You have known unknowns. You know what you don't know. You have unknown knowns, which I have no idea what those are. But the big thing is the unknown knowns, right? You don't know what you don't know. Mm-hmm. And a lot of professionals, every category out there, especially HR, that are used to understanding how a payroll for this company works, or this is the way we've always done it. They don't know what else is going to be out there, and they have a hard time making that transcendence from a small organization where they're essentially an HR generalist to an HR director for a larger group and, of 1,500 employees, or, starting to direct specific strategic programs for Fortune 500 companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and starting much bigger initiatives.
Yes.
And having a lot more people under you, and then more than likely, more programs, types of culture and leadership programs and things, because you have to do business development inside, right? Not just outside. And then having that framework to use. So tell me how you use Six Sigma to change the behavior of HR? Is that what you're doing?
Kind of. So basically, it is the how of who is what I want. How you deal with people, right? How you structure your HR practices, right? And so if you take your customers, right, and we'll use talent acquisition, because talent acquisition is one of I think it's the core or capstone of what HR does, right? It acquires talent for a company. If you look at who your end users are, who your customers are, HR is in a very interesting spot because as a business discipline and business profession, we have multiple customers, right? We have the executive management, frontline supervisors, employees, vendors, applicants, right? And so identifying, and this is where I think Scrum adds a lot of value to it because their customer storyboards are super effective at understanding what the end user wants out of the function or the program or the process. So in the talent acquisition process, right, the executive management wants to have a stability sense within the company that they can hire and meet the workforce demands in the future, right? Managers want a specific spot within their department filled by someone who's capable of doing that job, right? Frontline supervisors usually want someone they can coach, get along with, won't, have too much of an issues. The employees and the peers within that want people they can get along with that fit their culture and, don't create a whole lot of rifts and things of that nature. Applicants want a job, and vendors want you to hire. Regulators want you to hire correctly without bias, without discrimination, and whenever possible, and especially if you're in the federal government, to hire diverse candidates and then have inclusion and equity involved. So, you can look at that and say, okay, here's our goal, right? With all of our customers, right? Here's all the different things they want from it, right? And from there, you're a Kaizen or continuous improvement, right? You basically break down your talent acquisition process in there, and then you analyze it from one step to another, to another, to another, to another, right? So from how you source the candidate to how you screen the candidate to how you select it, right? And then you can basically use your variation measurements, right, to identify, okay, the candidates that we get from LinkedIn go through 5 steps within the interview process, and they make it twice as far as people that we find on Indeed, right? And so that tells you where you should focus a little bit more, but it also tells you and allows you to basically measure and start looking at where those things are. And then you can run through your continuous improvement to identify if there's ways you can get better results from there, right? And so then you can look at, when you have a candidate that only makes it 1 step on LinkedIn versus the average of 5, right? That variation of 1 through 5 steps allows you to look through it, run a root cause analysis, some design of experiments and different tools that are out there to basically try to figure out what worked, what didn't, and then alter your process that you have a better process that is better at predicting the outcomes that you have. Then you can run through your lean management of removing waste. And I'm not going to get into it, but there's basically 8 categories of waste, and it has to do with overwork and things of that nature that you can look at and say, okay, in this process, this doesn't add value. This doesn't help any of our customers. And you can strip it out so that your process runs smoother, right? Developing people is probably the biggest part of it. And that's actually training and working with the people that are involved in the hiring process on how the process works, why you're doing it, what the customer focus is, what the definition of done is, and how it all works together. And especially in a people environment, having everyone on the same page is super important. And then you just control the process from there to make sure that people are doing it correctly. You're having your Kaizen moments where you're reviewing things, you're updating your customer and product goals, and and for repeatable processes like talent acquisition, you can look at each one basically as a mini product. So, it's just a repeatable product or project, right? And so like hiring a person, you can run through the same methodology that you would for product design as a process. It's just a smaller iteration of it.
Yeah, it's taking user stories and doing your vertical slices, right? Sometimes when you start to vertical slice into something that's the bigger story or product, item, backlog item, is that you find that that's not really what you were looking for, or there's little pieces in there that you really didn't need. Anyway, I love user stories. I'm going to go back here. You said, going from small size to medium size and talking about scalability and how you do that. So imagine, I know you can, how confusing it would be if you don't have these processes. First of all, if you don't have user stories, then you really don't know what the end goal is. And a lot of times we're really confused what we think that end goal should be. By writing out user stories, I think it's easier for us to identify then, first of all, whether that needs to be in that sprint at all. And then secondly, what the real goal is. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just thinking about how overwhelming it is. Again, going back to that, because you're saying like all of these little analytical pieces that can be used in HR to attract and retain employees based off of small analytics that people are unaware of, and then putting those into place. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah. And so, we can go back to the talent acquisition example. Response time for managers during the process when they have to approve, interview, and say, hey, schedule these interviews. I like these people, feedback in the systems. There is a big drop off where I have found that when managers don't promptly put feedback to move that system on, and it lags like a week or 2 weeks, the increase in the drop from candidates it's an upward curve. If that variable isn't controlled tightly to 48 hours, if the candidate can't get feedback 48 hours after taking a test or an interview, the chance of losing that candidate goes up by I think 80%, 75%, somewhere in that range. And it's going to be a little different for each company, but on a broad spectrum, if you ghost them for a week after an interview, it rubs them wrong.
Well, they've probably already found something else, because if they're interviewing, they're looking at other jobs. More than likely, you've lost them already.
Yeah, and you gave them a bad distaste, and they don't feel that you're the type of company that cares about the applicants and people and talent if you're going to give them a week without any type of confirmation.
True. I mean, there's been jobs. My husband was applying just earlier this year, and some people just don't even respond back. Even after 2 interviews, then it's like, there's not even a thank you that we went with another candidate. It's really interesting to me that those kind of things don't get followed up on. However, with that said, the busyness of all of the things that HR has to deal with, right? So those, like you said, it's falling through the cracks.
It is, but that's an easy technological automation to put a ticker in there that after 24 hours it says, hey, you need to update this in the system. And then 24 hours later says you need to update the system, right? Mm-hmm. And then if it goes one more day past it, you alert the HR manager or the recruiter, says, hey, you need to bug this manager about doing this, right? And then it'll get done. But if you don't track it, it's not going to get done, right? There's a saying that, that which is tracked gets done. And there's so many technology solutions for alerts and things of that nature that it shouldn't be an administrative burden for the manager or HR people in order to update that system.
Yeah, it should be easy. It's funny to me, in the world that we live in, that we still don't count on automation as much as we should.
Absolutely. It amazes me that, everyone's on G Suite or Microsoft Office, essentially, the large majority. And there's a very good calendar system in both of those with alerts and reminders and all of that. And I still see people with stickies, Post-it notes, all over their monitor and wall, and this crazy conglomeration of things to try to help remind them to do something. When I said, well, have your phone buzz every 10 minutes until you do it.
That's a great reminder, because it's going to bug you, and you're going to want to get rid of that task.
Absolutely. One of the big things that we look at HR Six Sigma is, because you're looking at improving the process, the hiring process, and the manager and the applicant are both customers in there, right? Mm-hmm. And HR navigates that process for them. So nudging the applicant and says, hey, you interviewed with someone, you should probably send them a thank you email. Right. And it's something I've never seen another HR organization do, is to remind applicants on how to navigate the process. Right. And how to improve
absolutely.
And that's an easy automation also. And so when you look at it and you realize it's a dynamic process, right? There's lots of variations with people, right? And that's really where HR Six Sigma comes in, is because people processes are innately varied, right? There's a lot of variation because people don't always act in a logical or rational manner, right? We have emotion, we have kids, there's all sorts of outside influences that come in. And so being able to map and control those variations helps HR, or I want to say out of a business discipline, we have a lot of area where we can improve and utilize these capabilities.
Yeah. Okay. So again, you just keep saying things that make me go back to user stories, because and how overwhelming it would be for HR from that perspective. Okay. Because there's so many users. So you're trying to build value for a bunch of different people, and without their stories, I think, again, I said it before, it gets lost, but for everyone, right? Not just for the recruiter, not for the HR, not for the employee, not for the person trying to apply. User stories, I think, are really important in this conversation.
Yeah, because that gives you your definition of what you're trying to do. That's the first step, is to get all those user stories, get your team that actually runs this together and all your users together and say, as an executive, I want this out of this process. As a manager, I want this out of, and those can change and those can update. Every time you run a Kaizen, you can run through there and say, okay, here's what it is. Here's how my user story has changed or how it's evolved. And then you keep changing your target a little bit and it keeps getting honed and it gets better and better and better. But you have to have what the user story is, what the end goal is.
Absolutely. And the way that you get that is by, like you said, getting users together. That's where I think we miss the mark in a big way, is that in companies, we're all in our own department and there's not a lot of cross-functionality in it. And we don't understand that getting our users to the table and asking them what they really want is where we find how to create value in our business, right? Otherwise, we're the product owner sitting there thinking we know what everyone wants, and or the HR person who doesn't quite understand that, like you said, this person is a different person than this person. What you're doing here and what you're doing here, two entirely different things. Okay, so cross-functional is important. Talk to me about how, in an HR setting, you're utilizing a cross-functional team to get to the goal of what you're looking for within the HR department.
Depends on what the function is, right? But yeah, the functions of HR, especially like you look at organizational design, right? How the company fits together, how it's structured, what the departments are, who's cross-function, who's matrixed. In that example, you're going to have a different customer with each different product owner. And so marketing will be a product owner, operations, sales, fulfillment, data, IT, finance, and from there, you're going to go through your customer stories again, right? Your storyboards, and identify what they're looking for out of this process, how they want to fit it. And you're going to have to create within that a matrixed organizational design that allows not just for them as customers, but them as team members and peers to communicate and organize on the management of how the company gets run on the day-to-day basis. I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. That's good. Okay, so let's go down a path that I think needs to be talked about as well, so you can help me with this. It's hard to change mindset. So traditional business functions operate in something that's called waterfall, right? And most companies do it. It's we build something and we build it. We spend 6 months building something. And then at the end we go, it's done, and we throw it out, and it didn't really add that much value to our business because we weren't taking any steps in between for continuous improvement. However, that's how people are used to doing business, right? For the most part. So how do we begin to shift our mindset into an agile company, into creating, or, let's say you're taking something that has been in place for a long time and we're trying to change the mindset of a company or the leaders of a company into why this type of methodology is important in their business. Where would you start having that conversation with them about HR in general?
Yeah. So the way I've had success, and I think this is pretty common sense knowledge to most people, you tell the stories, right? And then you back it up with data. There's a great book out there. It's called Scrum. I think it's doing twice the work in half the time. It talks about Scrum and how when the FBI, I believe, was updating their databases, they went through a traditional waterfall to develop it. And it took 2 years longer than it was supposed to. And it didn't provide the results they wanted. And one of the reasons you have Agile and technology is because technology changes so quickly. So having Scrum come in and fix it within 6 months and get something out there was tremendous. And that was with the government and databases that integrated and sharing intelligence after September 11th, I believe, which was super important, super valuable, and super difficult in matrix, right? Because you had the CIA, NSA, Homeland Security, local police department, all these different things trying to share things. So it's complicated, and there's so many different customers in there from the software developers side. So trying to take that shift, right, for any organization, since it's been done, is you can tell the story and then you can pop the data of how those changes and can correlate to their business to actually give them the value that they need.
The value.
Yeah. And so it's not cost savings, right? I think HR as a whole needs to get away from cost savings, right?
Yeah.
Lean management is cost savings, and that's part of all of these processes and management philosophies. But added value, what your customers get out of it, is the core focus of how you shift the mindset of those executives, those senior managers that are actually the decision makers. Because those are the guys buying your product.
Yeah.
In Scrum, that's going to be your product owner. Identifying the story, grabbing some relevant case studies, and there's tons of them. You can Google them online and say, okay, this worked for Lockheed Martin. When they did Six Sigma, they saved X amount, this percentage. If we do that, that translates to my company of 500 employees. That will save us $2 million a year. And $2 million a year for a company that's medium-sized is a significant amount of money.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
And that could be the difference between laying off people and expanding, seizing on an opportunity or not being able to take an opportunity that your competitors will. That mindset to the business owners and the senior management that are at the strategic and higher operational level, that's what's important to them. So you got to talk about the value that you're adding to it, not just cost savings, but the value you're adding to it and how it gives you the operational maneuverability as a company, especially on the talent side, to say, hey, we have the talent that we can take this opportunity. We have the processes so we can scale this and we can do more without messing up. Because one of the big things executives are worried about is if they have the talent to take the company to the next 2 years. So you can grab case studies from it, Kaizen.com, Scrum.org, Six Sigma, all these things have tons of case studies up there on how these things work. Behavioral economics, from the World Economic Forum, have a lot of things where they talk about these different management styles and how you can, by, knowing your customer, targeting zero waste, following the action, empowering your people, and being transparent can get you to that next level.
And it's absolutely true. I love that you pointed out that there's case studies out there, and we'll put the links to a lot of the stuff we're talking about today in the show notes. But I want to go to, you said, value. So focus on, really what companies normally focus on is ROI, but we're saying focus on VOI, because value on investment. And the reason why is because VOI equals ROI. Right? So it's not ROI versus value on investment. It is that value on investment equals your ROI in the end.
Yeah, just for people who don't know what ROI is, because I know it's not a term a lot of HR administrative people at the base level are familiar with. It's return on investment, not revenue on investment, because I see that get mixed up sometimes.
Oh, I'm glad you pointed that out. I had not heard previously revenue on investment. So
yeah, and it's, HR is a value-adding partner, not a revenue-adding partner. And the value brings revenue by having better customer service reps, by having a better manufacturing personnel that can change and update their processes, having better management. That's where we add value to it, rather than actually like selling something to a customer as an HR representative.
Right. Well, I love that. I'm just looking through my notes here, trying to see if we've missed anything, but a lot of it I really love. And I love the word that you describe it as management philosophies, because it's kind of hard to, I think, sometimes wrap our brains around the word methodology. And honestly, a lot of people really don't like that word. So I like the philosophies better. That's a good word describer.
Yeah, and for people that don't like methodology, you just got to break it down, right? Ology comes from, the Greek word that has to do with the study of, right? And I think it's not logos, biology, philosophy. All the ologies basically mean the study of, right? And method is just a pattern of practice, right?
Right.
These are the kind of things we do. So all it is the study of how we do things, right? And it gets used as a buzzword a whole lot. Lean, Agile, Scrum, they do now. But, if you take the core focus of what those are and you study them, right, you have a methodology, technically speaking.
True. That is very true. All of this has been really great. I was really excited to have you on here again, because I haven't had anybody talk about this, and I geek out on these philosophies. I'm going to change my word. I really like that. And again, going to the non-traditional function of it, getting out of software and understanding how these types of philosophies actually can work in any environment. And I love that it's HR driven. So with you specifically, so tell me, Tim, is there anything that you think needed to be said today that we did not say?
Yeah, I would say the big thing we missed or did not delve into a whole lot is that whether it's Agile, whether it's Scrum, Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen, if you look and go through and read any book on how they've actually been implemented, and the Michael L. George books, Lean Six Sigma for Service, give very poignant case studies. Scrum, the art of doing twice the work in half the time, also talks about this, is that organizations don't have to implement any of these systems verbatim. They are about a cultural focus on their core principles. And each organization is different because each group of people is different because each person is different. And because of that, having unified philosophical values and goals on how you operate, whether it's lean focused, whether it's one of the different philosophies out there, that building a culture and reinforcing a culture that supports, promotes, and drives that home is the most fundamental aspect about implementing any management system or management philosophy there is. And HR owns culture, so it's on us as HR practitioners to do that. Not just for our own department. Now, it helps if we implement Scrum or Agile into an Agile company, but if we're implementing throughout the whole organization or we're an Agile, we as HR people are the banner carriers of culture. And so it's on us to understand what it is and make sure that we're doing it too.
Right. And we didn't even get into that because you and I discussed a little bit in our pre-chat, which was how HR isn't quite this day what it was designed to be. And how you're having conversations about changing that over and having it be, that they're the implementers of culture.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of the dumpers of all programs.
Yes.
Oh, you want a wellness program? Give it to HR. They know what to do. No, they actually really don't. And you can empower your HR department by having an agile mindset and putting in place some of these management philosophies. And the other thing about having an agile mindset really is that, like you mentioned, it's not all or nothing. It doesn't have to be just Scrum. It doesn't have to be just Lean. It doesn't have to be just Six Sigma, but that you can actually utilize a lot of these philosophies within each other because, again, like you mentioned, Tim, everybody and everything is different.
Oh, absolutely. And even in my own company, I run through this Six Sigma core values and processes to evaluate and do things. But when it comes down to how a process is going to get done, if there's significant variation on it, right, where basically it's hard to predict what the outcome is going to be, I will run and change that rather than being a lean process where you're just trying to streamline it to an agile process where you're focused on your 4 agile principles within there. So it's people over process, right? Mm-hmm. And so there you're talking about training, having people that understand the intent of the process so that they can make those navigational things on a case-by-case basis, because you can't on a process or procedure do that. So if you can't define it and narrow down the variation on it, it 100% should go to Agile. If it's something you can streamline, like processing payroll, right, because there's not a whole lot of variation on that, run through Lean so that it takes less time, is less burdensome to your organizational resources.
Yeah, so having at least even a base understanding of these types of philosophies is great. I mean, I have a Scrum board behind me because that's what I am, a Scrum master, but I actually use it more like a Scrumban. It's more like Scrumban because I put the two together because it just suits my needs better than being very strict on Scrum. And I find that to work more appropriately than me being just steadfast on my own philosophy that I was trained in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's going to kind of like do something that works for them. Mm-hmm. And for their team.
Right. And that is the true essence of being agile.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, Tim, this has been a really great conversation. I would hope to have you come back again.
Oh, absolutely. Your products and services with Scrum and the podcast are immensely helpful to a community.
That's a wrap
Thank
for
you.
today.
I appreciate that. That's why I do what I do, because I do believe that there are people who want to create amazing, happy, healthy workplaces, profitable businesses where people really want to work. Go figure. So that's why I really want to work.
This is Kimberly Ficklin.
So I am going to thank you.
A happy, healthy day.
The links to everything we talked about in the show notes, as well as the links how to get a hold of Tim Proctor, how to connect with him on LinkedIn in the show note. Be sure to subscribe, share, and like if you love what you heard today. Thank you. Have a happy, healthy day.